Welcome to a new week here on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Micciche. On the podcast this week, I'm going to do something quite different. My father-in-law, Doug, passed away on May 22nd after a very brief battle with cancer. I first met Doug when I was 16 years old, and for the last 24 years that I've known him, he's been a confidant and someone I love and miss deeply. Doug was also a financial advisor in our advisory practice at True North, and over the years, I learned from him, not just personally, but professionally as well. So I wanted to take the opportunity to share a few things about Doug, the kind of man he was, the way he inspired me, and the things he taught me. To do that, I think we should start at the beginning. I actually don't remember the first time I met Doug, but my husband and I, because we started dating in high school, I am absolutely sure that the 16-year-old me walked into his house acting like I owned the place. And because my husband and I were also high school sweethearts, I spent a lot of time in his parents' home watching countless hours of TV and movies in their family room. Because my husband, he's the kind of son teenager who didn't want to go away to his bedroom and live there all the time. He was perfectly content to hang out in the family room. And so he and I would do that. And Doug and I both shared a mutual love for bad 90s action movies. And by the time my husband moved out of his parents' home, I had already spent more quality time with Doug than most daughter-in-laws get to spend with their father-in-law in a lifetime. And for that, I am very grateful. One of my favorite pastimes was needling Doug. He was a little too easy to get under his skin, and I quite enjoyed that in a playful way. So that was a tradition and something that was just kind of a dynamic and part of our relationship all the way up until the very end. And back in the early days, I remember I would plop down on their couch so aggressively, I might as well have been working on my high jump and using the couch to break my fall. And when I did that, Doug's chair was right to the left of where I would sit on the couch. And so I would immediately look over at Doug with this sly smile, waiting for his reaction, waiting for the inevitable sigh or eye roll. And eventually, after thousands of forceful couch plops, the spring broke in their couch in the exact spot where I would always sit. And I still maintain I had nothing to do with that janky couch spring. Their house also had hardwood flooring on the stairs, and like a 7-year-old boy, I would fly down the stairs, and the pounding reverberation on the stairs, it irritated him to no end. So whenever I would run down the stairs, he would always yell, "Stampede!" And I just took that as an invitation to pound my heels as loud as possible whenever I came down the stairs, just to see if I could get a stampede yell out of him. Doug was a great listener, and I often went to him when I had a problem or I needed some advice. He was always honest and a no BS guy. And he was really great at telling me what I needed to hear, even if it wasn't what I wanted to hear. And so with him, I could trust his advice, and I knew that he always had my best intentions in mind. There was absolutely no duplicity in Doug, and I very much appreciated that about him. Doug was also one of the most selfless people that I know. Anything you asked him to do, he would do it. And whether he wanted to do it or not, you really had no idea because he cheerfully devoted himself to other people and their needs. Another running joke was he's Italian, and he and I actually, speaking of 90s movies, he and I both like Rocky, the movie series Rocky. So if you recall, Rocky was the Italian stallion. Doug, we joked that he had this he was so frequently picking up people, taking them to the airport, that he had his own non-registered, of course, airport transport business. And we called it Stallion Transport after the Italian stallion, another ode to the Rocky movies. But he would give me rides to and from the airport. He'd pick me up in the pre-dawn hours for early flights. I always habitually booked the super early flights, and he would joyfully show up at 5 a.m., and take me to the airport, and we'd chat on the way to the airport. And it was just those small moments with Doug that I really enjoyed and really miss. Stallion Transport also very faithfully and joyfully helped with school pickups for my kids. This past year, my 4-year-old started preschool and he went 3 days a week. And Doug actually picked him up 2 of those 3 days a week. And Doug was always first in line because he was also ridiculously early, annoyingly early for everything. And he would bring Theodore, my 4-year-old, he'd bring him some gummy worms that Theodore quickly came to expect. Like, instead of greeting, Papa, Papa, so good to see you, he'd be like, Papa, where's my gummy worms? And so Doug was so deeply authentic. He was genuinely interested in other people, and he was kind down to his core that he made friends wherever he went. And this is interesting because Doug was not a very extroverted, like gregarious, talking a lot guy. He wasn't that way at all, but he could relate to anyone. And making new friends was like a superpower he had. I always would watch and see, he just made friends everywhere. He made friends with parents at my kids' sports games because he would do school pickup. He was always there, 1 or 2 days a week. And he would inevitably make friends with other grandparents or people he would see at pickup. And most stunning of all, he actually made friends and stayed in contact with a guy that he sold a car to, like a random chance encounter. And it turned into a friendship, and they stayed in touch for many years after that. Doug valued simplicity, and he was content to spend his days at home. And as his wife, Becky, wrote in his obituary, quote, his pleasures were simple: daily exercise, command of the TV remote and a Friday night pizza, an enjoyable book, and a nice slice of pie or cake. He was uncompromising when it came to his faith, to keeping his home and his yard well tended and his cars impeccable. What I admire most about Doug was his enduring faith. He was Catholic, I'm Catholic, and we all would go to Sunday Mass together every single week. And he would also watch daily Mass on live stream. They would live stream it at our church, and he would watch that every day on TV. He prayed and read the Bible often, and like most men, he was quite private about his spiritual life. But I caught glimpses of it often. A spiritual book he was reading, a text from him. He would always text me if he knew like I had a doctor's appointment or I was sick or I was going through some hardship. He would always text me and let me know he was praying for me. And he did this often with all kinds of things with me, but I actually found out after he passed that he did it for other people too. Not just people in our family, but he remembered things. He remembered what you were going through, and he would text you and just to let you know he was thinking about you and praying for you. And in fact, my dad had a health issue earlier this year, and he texted me to tell me that he dedicated his rosary that day to my father and his healing. Doug was diagnosed with cancer on April 17th of this year, and he passed away barely a month later on May 22nd. His decline was so rapid and unexpected, and we were all stunned by his initial prognosis, which they told him that even with chemo, he probably had only 1 to 2 years left. And at that time, the doctors didn't know how advanced his cancer was. So he actually didn't have a lot of time to really process his diagnosis, which maybe was a blessing. But I remember Becky would tell me, she'd read and share with me some of the notes from their doctor's appointments. And the oncologist commented how cheerful he was. And he had like vigor and energy despite being so sick. And that's how he was, because even prior to this cancer diagnosis, he had a neck surgery and he had a lot of lingering pain from that. He had a lot of aches and pains and previous health issues, but he always, you never really could tell how sick or in pain he was, because even though you'd catch glimpses of it from time to time, he never really let on, and he always maintained his cheerfulness despite having so many health issues and being so sick. like everything else with his health, he accepted his final fate with grace and even humor on occasion. In the end, I took great comfort and hope in the fact that Doug received all the sacraments. He went to confession and he received last rites, which is very important in the Catholic faith. In his last days, they moved his hospital bed setup. So he had his hospital bed in their bedroom, but they moved it next to their bed so his wife, Becky, could lay there. She could lay in bed and basically be laying there with him, always at his side. And I spent a few hours over the course of his last days laying there with him too and praying for him and occasionally talking to him just to let him know that I was there and that I loved him. Our pastor from our church visited him twice in his last days of life, and I was there for the second time he visited, which was a little over a day before Doug passed. And as part of the blessing and the prayers that the priest does for the dying, he read a text from Revelation chapter 21. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death or mourning, wailing or pain, for the old order has passed away. The one who sat on the throne said, "Behold, I make all things new." Looking at Doug lying there, so weakened and close to death, yet so peaceful, those words captivated me. Behold, I make all things new. Doug is at peace now, and I have great hope that he is looking down on us from heaven. No more death, no more pain, no more mourning, only everlasting happiness and joy with God in heaven, because he makes all things new. I know I can still count on Doug as a confidant and ask him to pray for me. I just need to look for more subtle signs of his advice and guidance, not the straightforward, blunt, telling it like it is advice that I'm used to from Doug. I'd like to close with an excerpt from a letter that my husband wrote to his dad. Now, my husband wrote this letter and shared it with Doug the day his diagnosis changed from 1 to 2 years to 1 to 2 months. And it turned out that Doug only had a few days left with us. And he heard this letter from his son only a couple days before the cancer took away his ability to comprehend what my husband was saying in this letter. So timing is such a funny thing, because if my husband had put off writing this letter and sharing it with his dad by just a day or two, it would have been too late. But my husband said all the things he wanted to say to his father just in time. My husband said, "Fatherhood, faith, and my marital life. These are the priorities, and you helped instill them in me. You more than did the job that the Lord asked you to do, and you did it well. I am forever grateful." Well, Doug, we are all grateful to have known and loved you. Doug's funeral will be on Wednesday, June 25th, and if you're so inclined, I ask for your prayers for Doug and our family and all those who love and miss him. His wife, Becky, especially needs your prayers, I think, the most. She was married to Doug for over 40 years, and this is a great loss and a great burden for her to carry right now. I hope you have a blessed week. My name is Ashley Micciche, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.